Alright, hello everybody. It's Vince again from Hudson Bonsai. Today I'm just going to do a quick update video on some of the trees I've worked on this year. Here's some of them. I'll kind of bring them in one at a time and get a little closer in so you can, kind of see what's really going on. So, get started. So first here, this is one of the small eastern white pines that I worked on. They're all basically in the same condition at this point. I hope you can see all of the buds forming at and around the tips here where I cut. Some of them have a little bit more back budding going down, but this one I thought was a decent example. So my goal of shortening those inner nodes down and achieving some branching further down. If you remember, these candles were a bit longer, maybe twice that length, so my buds would have formed up in here and I would have no branching in that area. So this was a pretty successful operation. Like I say, all these trees are all the trees from that video are doing quite well, and they're all at about the same stage. The buds are formed. So I'm going to move on to the next tree. This next one here is the Azalea from the video, just about doing a hard cut back on an Azalea, when and why. I already did an update on this video, but I just thought I'd show it again because it is just continuing to grow really nice and healthy and strong. This tree's doing fantastic. Next up here is some of the cuttings. These are the 3 sets of cuttings from, I believe they're actually from that tree. I could be wrong about that though. That I tried in the 3 different types of media to see, if maybe one did better than the other. It's a pretty small test group, but I just kind of did it for the heck of it. All of these cuttings are actually doing pretty well. I would say, if anything, the ones in the normal potting soil are kind of doing the worst. These ones in the sphagnum are looking really nice and healthy, and the ones in the sand. I also have this group here. This was from the Getsutoku Azalea that I potted right in just regular 1-1-1 bonsai mix. These are all doing pretty well. This next tree here is a small Schefflera, or Dwarf Hawaiian umbrella tree. I don't generally work with tropical trees just because I have a tough time keeping them for the winter. I plan to have a greenhouse at some point, but I don't right now. I just couldn't resist this little thing for a couple of dollars. I made a video of pruning and repotting this tree, but I have not, as of yet, actually released that video. I did that probably about a month and a half ago. I'll try to get that video out, but I just thought I'd show how nice and healthy this tree is growing. It's got roots actually coming right out of the pot, pretty much all the way around. It's growing really healthy, and hopefully I'll be able to keep it in the house through the winter. This next tree here is the Getsutoku Azalea that I pruned in a video. I really didn't go very aggressive with the pruning on this tree because it really does have some decent structure in here, in my opinion, and there really wasn't a need to take it back that hard. But I've just let it grow out since then, and I won't be pruning this again until deadheading season, and then I'll go back and reduce some of these tips in length and also in the number of shoots, just like I would always do with any azalea. But I just thought I'd show how much growth this thing has put on through the summer. It's still growing at this point. It should be setting up flower buds by this point, but there is still some foliage growing at the tips. Next one I have here is one of the American elms from my video American Elm Bonsai. This is the one that I said I cut every bit of root off of this. I left maybe a few stubs of structural root on there, and it had some foliage that had come out, and in the video I said I was expecting this to really, kind of blow up, and it has. It's put on. This is all growth that occurred since that video was made. You can see some of the spring foliage still left on here, but most of what you see has been the second flush, which is still pushing out. I think this tree is doing really well, for what it was, what I kind of expected to happen. I will more than likely cut this main trunk back a little shorter, either in the fall or in the summertime next year. But it's coming along nicely. This next tree here is one of those willow stumps that I just potted up about a week and a half ago, maybe. And they're all about in this condition. One or two of them have maybe a little bit longer extensions, but not so numerous. But these are doing really well. I'm sure they're gonna put on a pretty significant amount of growth by the fall and be able to charge up some energy for next year. A lot of these have some pretty cool structure and trunks in them. So again, I'm pretty happy with the results here. The next tree I've got here is my large dwarf Alberta spruce. This one I did some pruning in the spring, post-flush hardened pruning, and I added a few little pieces of wire here and there. This tree will probably get worked on again fairly soon. You can see a lot of these new tips have just decided to grow, straight up. They'll need to be kind of wired out. There's a few wires that are biting in pretty good now that will need to be removed. But overall, this tree is doing really well and healthy. I pruned quite a bit up here at the top. It still needs more, but as I said in the original video, I do like to let those branches develop a little bit before I thin them down. It's just pumping energy into the tree, and it's really difficult to wire real tiny spindly branches that have needles along the entire length. I like to let them mature a little bit before I actually wire them. So I will probably be doing that next springtime or early summer after the first flush of growth hardens off. Anyway, this one I'm also pretty happy with. These minor things that I mentioned are, just to be expected with a spruce. They always want to grow straight up. They'll actually move a branch into a more upward position through reactive growth, where the bottom side of the branch grows faster than the top side. So even a mature branch can actually begin to curve up. So they do need, a fair amount of maintenance. These next couple of trees I'm not going to bring into the shop just for this little update because they're just too big and heavy. This is the large Scots pine that I worked on, and you should be able to see all of this back budding. I wouldn't really call this a second flush of growth. This is going to be very minor bits of needle that actually form, but you can see, how vigorously this has just pushed out buds. There's probably 30 buds on this branch tip right now. This tree was really strong and healthy, and it's responded quite well. Again, these internodes are now much shorter than they would be if I had left them alone, and I have plenty of buds at the tip to work with and create the fine ramification on this tree. And right alongside it here is the large azalea that had been frost damage that I worked on, and there's Thomas the cat, and that is also doing quite well. It's pushed out a lot of growth. there's my large procumbens juniper. That's, I didn't do heavy work on that either, but it is, continuing to grow healthy and strong. It's starting to develop a fairly thick trunk, in my opinion. This tree is developing quite quickly, and I think that's got a lot to do with the fact that that pot is quite large, and this tree has a lot of foliage on it. There's one of the other Alberta spruce that I worked on, Mugo pine, or the dwarf Mugo pine. Got its first styling this year. There's the burning bush that I removed that crossing root down there in a video. That tree's doing quite well. I find that they generally don't put on a very strong second flush in the year, and it's kind of the foliage that you get in the spring is what you get. So hopefully next year this thing will expand and I'll be able to do some more work on it. What we can kind of see there is the white spruce forest that I worked on. It's doing well, healthy. Next to it is an Alberta spruce that I was potted into a bonsai pot but hasn't been worked yet. Last tree I wanted to get in this video, and I hope you can see it, is that large American hornbeam that I partially defoliated, and it is growing really super well. This is the branch that will eventually be the apex. It won't be quite this high, but I need to thicken up that branch to turn it into the trunk. It's about 6 feet tall now at this point, and really all of the branches have just expanded greatly, and there's a look at that nice nabari that's down there. So I have high hopes for this tree, but it is a very long-term project. That trunk cut there is going to take some years to fade in. Like I said, this new leader needs to just be allowed to grow and thicken up for, I would guess, at least 3 to 5 years before it needs to be chopped again to develop the next stage of taper on this trunk. Alright, well, that's going to do it for this video. Obviously I didn't update you on every tree that I've worked on this year, but I tried to concentrate on trees that either maybe had some risk of not surviving or actually showed some change from the last video. Most of the conifers that I've worked on, I worked on them after their foliar growth phase of the year, so they don't look very much different today than they did when I made the video. You really won't see the changes in those until next year, but a lot of the deciduous trees are still actively growing, and you can really see a difference between a few weeks or a month ago. So that's why I chose the trees that I did. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time. Bye.